Welcome everyone to Fantasy Focus Live.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Lamarco, and we're here on the Fantasy Focused YouTube channel to break down Week 14 starts, sits, streamers. Also going to talk Thursday Night Football and some playoff waiver wire names, maybe less owned guys you could scoop up and pick up in your leagues. As you can see, I'm riding solo today, no Buck, but we miss him deeply. Hopefully he'll be back for the Sunday show. So we're going to run through this solo pod today. Just kind of break down some of the key matchups for running backs, tight ends, wide receivers, some guys to start, some guys to fade. We're also going to break down Thursday Night Football preview as well. Before we do that, I want to make sure everyone's following us across the board on the Fantasy Focused YouTube channel. Make sure you're also following us on the podcast side at the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast. You can find us across the board on most social medias, Twitter, Instagram, at our names, at Bobby Lamarco, at Fantasy Football X Factor for myself on Instagram, at TCKPod_Fantasy Football on Instagram for Sky, at Sky Gawasko, his name on Twitter, and at Fantasy Focused across the board. Make sure you're following Buck59 and J Del Valley as well, other commentators on our show. But before we do that, we want to make sure everyone knows where our podcasts are being part of the Believe Podcast Network and brought to you by BetOnline AG. So we're going to take a quick commercial break for BetOnline AG, and we'll be back right after this to discuss more on starts, sits, and streamers.
BetOnline is back and better than ever. A new web interface for the rest of the NFL season and the NBA season. More props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all football and basketball action this season. Make sure to head over to the new updated desktop or mobile website and sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code BELIEVE50. That's BLEAV50. BELIEVE50 to receive your bonus. From football to basketball to NHL to boxing to UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the rest of the 2021 seasons. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, folks, let's get into it. So we're going to talk a little bit today about Thursday Night Football preview, some start, sit, streamers. We're also going to talk a little bit about some playoff waiver wire. I actually did mine with Jordan yesterday, and I got Buck and Ryan to send me some names, too, that they think you should monitor. See if they're available on waiver wires. These are all players under 50% owned on Yahoo. So typically we're trying to find a consensus there, but we used Yahoo for this. So you might want to check out your ESPN, whatever leagues you're in, to see if these guys are available later in the show. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about our Thursday Night Football preview, which of course is brought to you by our Sunday Live Start Sit Show. If you watch the intro video, every Sunday Live, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., we do 3 hours of Start Sit Live. If you guys just want to see commentary, we do weather updates, we do injury updates, we do matchups, we do a bunch of other things on the show for 3 hours, but most of it's Start Sit content. I know a lot of people send their Start Sit questions early on in the week. And listen, we try to get to as many as we can, but we dedicate 3 hours every week to get into all your Start Sit questions. It does take about 10 to 15 minutes to get to every question because there's so many, so stay with us. But this segment, our Thursday Night Football segment, is brought to you by that Sunday Live Start Sit Show and Good Sports. As a reminder for everyone on the show today listening to us live, that all our shows on Sunday, we donate 10% of any donation we get from our super chatters, from anyone that was trying to get into the giveaways. We want to make sure that everyone knows that this football season for December, we're going to be doing a super chat giveaway. So essentially, all you got to do is become a super chatter on YouTube or become a part of the TCK Pod Venmo account if you're on Twitch. If you're following outside of YouTube, if you donate to the show, we're going to get you in to our giveaway at the end of December. For every $500 we raise for donations, we're going to offer a jersey up to one of our followers. So as long as we're giving back, that's $50 to Good Sports and to our process as well. So we're excited for that. So if you guys can become a super chatter, it really helps us a long way to produce the show. But we're also trying to give back to Good Sports, which is a good charity organization that donates its sporting equipment to underprivileged communities to help kids play sports. All right, folks, let's get into it. So our Thursday night football preview, I just want to talk quickly about this, and it's the Steelers versus Vikings going on today. It is Thursday. We're going to talk about this. The Vikings 43.5 over under is kind of jaw-dropping. That's actually not that good. Vikings are favored -3 at home. The good news is this game is a dome game, and I think that's going to help Big Ben and company. I know they're Pittsburgh and, the smash mouth team they are, but, they can't run the football consistently, and I think this is a better game for them as well. But when you're looking at the injuries for this game, the Vikings defense is getting extremely healthy. The Pittsburgh defense outside of Joe Hayden is getting healthy. So, I think this game is interesting because it's fun. It's not a division game. These teams don't play a lot, so that'll be fun. But just looking at the injuries overall, the line for the Steelers, I brought this up last week. They are the BJ Finney, who the guard was supposed to be in. He's now hurt. Guys replacing Kevin Dotson, who is replacing Joe Haig. I mean, they have so many injuries to one guard spot on this roster. It's insane. But 4 or 5 starters on the line is fine. But Najee Harris and company are going to have a little bit of tougher test because I brought this up last week. Most of the Vikings defensive line is back and healthy on the inside. They did get back Dalvin Tomlinson, Mike Pierce, and company, but they also get back Eric Kendricks and Patrick Peterson this week. So this Vikings defense is pretty healthy overall based on what they've been over the past few weeks. The Pittsburgh defense, having TJ Watt and company healthy for those games have been huge for them as well. So, with some injuries to the offensive side of the ball, for example, like Adam Thielen being out for this game, Dalvin Cook not at 100%, but it does sound like he's going to be in. A lot of people are going to ask who to play, Cook or Madison. And listen, you got to play Cook. It's unfortunate, but this is different than the Darrell Henderson situation. Henderson was not practicing all week. He was activated as an emergency back, so I think this is a much different situation than Sony Michel / Darrell Henderson was last week. So you're leaning into Cook in that scenario, but it's unfortunate you're not going to get 100% of Cook in this game. I think from that perspective, though, the only 2 guys that because Christian Darrisaw is out as well, the left tackle, along with Adam Thielen. But, for the most part, this Vikings defense is getting healthy, and, that opens up some opportunities. So I know the must-start players for the Thursday night football game is Deontay Johnson, Justin Jefferson. We're setting them for getting him. Najee Harris and Dalvin Cook, if you have them, you're playing them. Those are the 4 guys I feel in this game are slam dunks, and you don't need me to tell you that. That's obvious. But it really comes down to these wide receiver 2s, right? Chase Claypool and KJ Osborne are both, in the wide receiver 3 discussion this week. And my level of confidence is not that high necessarily for either of these guys. I think I would prefer Claypool over KJ Osborne. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers are okay against receivers. They are missing Joe Hayden, but I think, Justin Jefferson is going to be the guy who eats against them. I don't think KJ Osborne and him and Tyler Conklin and company are all going to dominate against the Steelers defense because, like I said, outside of Joe Hayden, they are missing some guys up front too, but those injuries have been ongoing. They aren't new. So we kind of know what the Steelers are. And, you can beat the Steelers. We watched Joe Mixon dominate them on the ground a couple weeks ago. So, I think they are a little bit more better against the pass. So I think, in my perspective, I'm not running out to start KJ Osborne this week as a wide receiver 3 if I don't have to. If you need to, he's fine because Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback and he uses receivers very well. But even in the game with Aaron Thielen last week, he had 7 targets, which is fine. But listen, I'm not going to run out and start KJ Osborne or Chase Claypool in this matchup. Patrick Peterson is coming back. Minnesota has been terrible against receivers, and I would prefer Claypool, believe it or not. But the thing is, the toe injury, he did play a limited amount of snaps last week because of that toe injury. And then Ray McLeod actually ran more routes. So you're playing with a little bit of fire in this game, especially with Patrick Peterson, Eric Kendricks back, and that line looking better. So, I think in this matchup, you play your chalk players, and I think that's the ones I'm feeling confident with. At the tight end position, neither tight end has a good matchup. Tyler Conklin, Pat Freiermuth. And I have Freiermuth in a couple leagues, and I'm debating on starting guys like Gerald Everett, who plays Houston this week. And I know that they're going to get the same amount of routes versus dropbacks. They're both in the high 60, low 70 range. And Pat Freiermuth, listen, the Vikings didn't have Eric Kendricks last week. They were down Patrick Peterson and TJ Hockenson and had a good week. But TJ Hockenson scored a touchdown. And that's what you're going to need from Pat Freiermuth, which I think we all kind of know and understand at this point. And, I just don't know. I don't feel confident in Pat Freiermuth either in this matchup. So I think for me, I'm trying to figure out if it makes sense to go with a Gerald Everett, maybe a Ricky Seals-Jones type in their matchups versus this, because the Vikings have been very good against tight ends. On the flip side, same thing with Tyler Conklin. The Steelers are not a yards after the catch defense, and Conklin does not get air yards at all. So Conklin's going to be expected to do a lot of things after the catch, and the Steelers are really tough against tight ends too. But listen, the tight end landscape is what it is. So if you need to start these guys, that's fine. But, I think if you need juice in your lineups and you're an underdog going into week 14 and you need something big, I think Gerald Everett makes a lot of sense. I know he had a really bad week last week, but I'm okay with Freiermuth. I'm okay with Tyler Conklin. If I had to pick one, I would pick Freiermuth in this matchup, slightly ahead. That's really up there. And then for the quarterbacks in 2 QB leagues, believe it or not, actually Kirk Cousins, Ben Roethlisberger against Minnesota is actually not a bad matchup. But the thing is, keep in mind with Patrick Peterson back, Eric Kendricks back, it's not the same matchup last week that Jared Goff had. I know Goff did well, but you miss your top corner, your top coverage linebacker. That's going to hurt your defense in the pass game, especially with your defensive line getting healthier. So, I think Big Ben, I think we're not starting him in single QB leagues, but in 2 QB leagues, I think those guys, I think Big Ben might be all right. And the same thing with Cousins. I know with Adam Thielen being out, we have to be more conscious of stuff. Adam Thielen, you just don't plug in KJ Osborne and say, okay, here you go. We're good to go. So I think that is a ding to Kirk Cousins. But the good news is they're playing in a dome, and I think, that's helpful as well. I'm not interested in starting either defense, but the 2 kickers in this matchup are my number 1 and number 2. Believe it or not, this is weird. My kicker analysis this week, Greg Joseph is my number 1 kicker. If Greg Joseph is available, go get him, put him on your team. Number 2 is Chris Boswell. Both kicking in domes, both playing on Thursday night. I'm expecting both teams to move the ball in this matchup, but touchdowns might not be as prominent, and I think both these kickers are going to be pretty nice. So I think that's oddly enough, probably outside of the core 4 the running backs, the 2 top receivers, I think the kickers might be my favorite plays of the week in this matchup. But like I said, to break it down, it's Deontay Johnson, Justin Jefferson, locks. Najee Harris, lock. Dalvin Cook is in if he's in. If he's out, it's Madison. I'm not playing Madison if Cook is in. The quarterbacks are just low 2 QB guys, but I think both can be started in super flex and 2 QB leagues if needed. The tight ends are iffy. I actually don't like them that much, to be honest. If you can get away from them, great. I love Dawson Knox. If you have the option of playing Knox over one of these guys, I love Dawson Knox this week. I'd rather play him over those guys. And then the Chase Claypool / TJ Osborne, I think both these guys are fringe wide receiver 3s, but I'm not excited to go out of my way to start either. I would prefer Claypool in a vacuum, to be honest. But the thing is the toe injury. It sounds like he practiced in full, but I think if you need to start KJ Osborne and Chase Claypool, you can. But I would personally fade them as well, and we can talk. And then that's pretty much it. So that wraps up our Thursday Night Football preview. I know that was relatively quick. But once again, this is brought to you by our Sunday Live Start Sit Show. Make sure you're joining us every Sunday live, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. All donations that you provide during our show through the Super Chat goes to Good Sports. And make sure you're joining us on there as well. All right, folks, let's dive into some start, sits, and streamers this week. And before we do, we're going to take a quick commercial break from one of our newest sponsors, Factor, and we'll be back right after this.
Hey, TCK Potters and Fantasy Focus community. Are you looking for options for hair loss? There are many options out there for treating it. However, most products treat the cause, such as DHT, and don't do much to support the growth of new and stronger hair. It's like removing harmful weeds from your lawn, but not doing much to fertilize the grass. That's why the Fantasy Focus and TCK team has partnered with Factor. Factor saw this problem and focused their research on finding just the right combination of biosynthetic growth factors and an innovative delivery system to promote fuller, stronger looking hair. So whether you're a listener who suffers from various forms of alopecia or even stress-related hair loss, the Carifactor treatment is the perfect scalp-friendly solution that can help and influence stronger and healthy hair throughout all stages of the hair life cycle. And now, exclusively for TCK listeners, use the promo code TCK at checkout to get 15% off all products at shop.mycarifactor.com. That's shop.mykerafactor.com. Carifactor, skincare for hair.
All right, we're going to run through some starts, sits, and streamers this week. You know how me and Buck usually do. We go back and forth, a little ping pong action. But instead, I just kind of wrote down some guys that are not as highly owned at the QB position and stuff like that I think we can start. And some higher owned guys that we can sit. Just going to run through them this week. So first off, the one guy I liked a lot this week is Taysom Hill. He's playing the Jets. And it's mostly because, listen, Hills, I know he's got the finger issue and the throwing is a problem. But the one thing about that third quarter game where he got the 100 yards rushing is that you just don't overthink it with guys like Taysom Hill. He's going to offer you 10 points, upwards to 10 points. And in some weeks, it's 15 points because he gets a touchdown on the ground. Once you factor that in, it doesn't really matter if he's throwing for 150 yards and maybe one touchdown because he's going to get you stocked into 20 points before he throws a passing touchdown. So I don't think you overthink it. I'm in a league where I had Jalen Hurts, and I'm actually sticking between Taysom Hill and Cam Newton, who's my number 2 in this one. But I think that both those guys, Cam Newton and Taysom Hill, offer you I know, especially in Cam's case, the rushing was the game was terrible against Miami a couple weeks ago, but we'll talk about him in a second. But Taysom Hill, it's the Jets. I mean, the Jets have allowed a boatload of points to quarterbacks. Their defense has really struggled over the last handful of weeks. And I think you just don't overthink it. If he's healthy and he's practicing in full, which he's already doing, you're playing Taysom Hill. The other one I really like this week is going to be Cam Newton. And Cam Newton against the Atlanta Falcons. I know the Falcons this season have kind of just been a weird enigma. First year under Arthur Smith. Defensively, they just kind of been meh. They haven't really been great at anything or really that bad. But against quarterbacks, especially mobile ones, they haven't really done much to scare you off from playing Cam Newton. And plus, Cam Newton, you got to keep in mind, this isn't like just because he's back on the Panthers doesn't mean he knew the offense. When he left Carolina, it was the Norv Turner, Scott Turner offense. And now it's the Matt Rule / whatever you want to call it offense is going to be with Joe Brady gone. But it takes time for him to learn the offense. So when he came in, he got the 2 touchdowns in the first week, playing part-time. Everyone got all excited. And then he kind of laid an egg against Miami after a monster 30-point game the prior week. You know, to expect him to be really good week in and week out, and especially against a Miami defense that's starting to play a lot better, I think you got to give him a second chance. So if you're desperate, if you have a Jalen Hurts, if you're in a 2 QB league, Cam Newton against Atlanta, I think is a fine start in this matchup. Now to fade over to QB sits, some of the guys that I'm a little worried about for different reasons. And in first guy is Joe Burrow. And so Riley Reif and Trey Hopkins were out last week. It sounds like those guys should be coming back. I'm not 100% sure, but there's already reports that they're going to play it safe with Riley Reif. And when the Bengals, they don't have a good offensive line. Their offensive line was based on getting some type of continuity, but this is a bottom 10 offensive line. When you start losing starters, it becomes a disaster. And last week was the proof of that. Look at what the Chargers did to that Bengals offense. They dropped 20 points against this team. And Joe Burrow's now got the pinky, and we're watching that, and it sounds like he's going to be fine too, but it just sounds like any little impact to Burrow, if it's the offensive line, the pinky, now you're playing against a San Francisco 49ers defense who, seems a little streaky here at times, but they just have some boom weeks, and I think that Joe Burrow is someone I'm going to monitor. If the line is healthy and his finger's right, you might be okay starting Joe Burrow, but I think I'd rather start Taysom Hill and Cam Newton than Joe Burrow this week against San Francisco. The other one's Justin Herbert. And first it starts off with Keenan Allen on COVID. Then it's Mike Williams close contact. It sounds like Mike Williams is trending in the right direction, but Keenan Allen will not play. You just don't replace Keenan Allen with Josh Palmer and Jalen Guyton. Those guys are nice players, but that's a huge blow. And they're playing against the Giants defense. And listen, the Giants are, for what it's worth, the Giants are kind of a disaster on offense, but their secondary is legit. James Bradbury has been really good. They did lose Adoree Jackson. It sounds like he might not be back this week, so that's something to monitor. But the Giants' secondary has been pretty solid most of the season, and now you're playing against Justin Herbert, who could be down his two best receiving weapons. So I think you have to monitor that if you're a Justin Herbert owner. I'm not going to go out of my way to sit Justin Herbert if Mike Williams is active, for example, but I think it's something worth noting. Look out for Adoree Jackson. Make sure you're joining us on the Player Trends and Key Injuries show on Saturday. We'll break that down further. The final one is Lamar Jackson. And Lamar has been kind of just average, low QB1 because of his rushing is always great. But the Browns have been very good against him over the last few years. But the thing with the Ravens and the Browns is that they have this weird – they have one really bad game where offenses don't play well, and then they have one blowout game. Well, they already had the bad game. So I feel weird betting. I don't like to bet against Lamar twice against the same defense, but it's just something to keep in mind in the back of your head that Lamar has not been great against Cleveland overall. He's not been great against his other – I mean, he's slow against the Steelers. He was slow against the Browns just a couple weeks ago, and it's something worth monitoring. I don't think you sit Lamar this week, but maybe this is a DFS fade for this one. All right, so let's talk about some RB starts. The first one is Dantaforman. So there's not going to be – one of the weird things about the Titans situation is that they lost Julio. They lost A.J. Brown. And then they lost Nate Davis. They lost Taylor Lewan for a game or two. And they've been playing good teams. And they've been trailing in games. But Foreman has been an absolute workhorse. Just a couple weeks ago before the bye, people are going to forget that he ran for over 100 yards because Hilliard had the big monster play. But Foreman was the typical back, 20 carries, 100 yards against a pretty strong Patriots defense. And this week he gets Jacksonville. And Jacksonville early on in the season was actually a pass funnel defense, but over the last few weeks they've been exposed on the ground. Look at what Sony Michel just did to them. Very strong running game against them last week. And I think that Dantaforman, because of this match, you're not going to have a lot of scenarios until A.J. Brown's healthy, until Julio Jones is healthy. And Julio did become off IR, but he's not a guarantee to play. Until those guys are back on the field, there's not going to be a lot of scenarios where the Titans can take a lead. And Jacksonville's one of them. So I think you could bank on Dantaforman as a solid low-end RB2 this week if you need him to play him, because I think the matchup suits him very well in this week. The other one is Melvin Gordon. Now, Javonte Williams is a lock. You're going to love to play Javonte against Detroit, but I think Melvin Gordon, if he's healthy and active, it sounds like he's already practicing this week. It sounds like he's going to be in, and in my opinion, Detroit against if the Denver Broncos you're going to be on an emotional high, right? The Lions just emotional high, just beat the Vikings. They're super stoked. And I think now they're playing the Broncos, who Broncos have a great defense. They are not banged up at all, and they could definitely shut down Jared Goff and company. And I think that leads to more carries for Melvin Gordon. And I think a lot of people are going to forget about Melvin Gordon. People are going to think, oh, Javonte did so well, we're going to give all the work to him. I don't think that's the case. I think Melvin Gordon comes back, gets his close to 18 touches. He's playing against a very bad Detroit team that cannot stop running backs. So of course you're playing Javonte off the high week, but don't forget about Melvin Gordon against Detroit. So some guys I'm looking to sit. One of them is Joe Mixon, and I got burnt to toast I did this a couple weeks ago for Joe Mixon against San Francisco. But, I think the other thing with this one too is going to be that ground game, right? It's going to be those offensive linemen. Are they healthy? Because the 49ers are a team that are getting healthy. This team has been struggling with injuries all year, classic 49ers, but now they're starting to get a little healthier. And this defense, if you're starting to notice a theme, maybe my streamer defense of the week, we'll talk about in a second, but you're starting to see a theme. But I'm a little bit worried about Joe Mixon from a DFS standpoint if you're going to play him. But also, season long, it's tough to get away from volume backs. So I'm not going to recommend you bench Joe Mixon, even for Dantaforman, for example. But just temper your expectations this week for Joe Mixon. The other one's Cordell Patterson. And the Panthers this season have been kind of league average against running backs on the ground, but they've been very good against pass-catching running backs on the year. The other thing about Patterson is they're moving him away from the receiving game work and putting him more as a traditional running back. And Hayden Hurst will be back this week. That offers another weapon for this team. So I do think that when you're watching this situation, I think that Cordell Patterson is another guy that I'm a little worried about this week against Carolina, who has been pretty strong up front for most of the season against running backs. So I do think that Cordell Patterson is someone who has saved a lot of his fantasy weeks by touchdown. And the guy's an absolute weapon. But once they started dialing back his receiving work, that's a little concerning. And then on top of that, you also have to factor in that a lot of his games are saved by touchdowns. That's not a recipe for success against a decent defense against running backs. So I am concerned about Cordell Patterson this week. So I actually would prefer to start Dantaforman. Maybe that's my bold take of the week, a Foreman over Patterson, which is probably the worst take I'll ever make. But those are the kind of decisions where that line is for Cordell Patterson versus Foreman in these matchups. All right, before we get into wide receivers and tight ends and streamers, I'm going to take another quick commercial break. We're going to talk quickly about one of our newest sponsors as well, Lightbox, and we'll be back right after this.
Shout out to our new sponsor, Lightbox. Say goodbye to the dull gifts. Lightbox lab-grown diamonds are the brightest gift of the year. Using cutting-edge technology and innovative techniques, they've cracked the science of sparkle, creating the highest quality lab-grown diamonds you can find at a light price, $800 per carat. They have the same chemical makeup of natural diamonds, but are just grown in a lab. Because of their process, they can create stones of blush pink, beautiful blue, as well as classic white diamonds. Lightbox lab-grown diamonds are the gift they'll never want to take off, and priced so they won't have to. They really make any outfit sparkle. Visit lightboxjewelry.com and add sparkle to your holiday shopping. That's lightboxjewelry.com. Lightbox diamonds. Never a dull moment.
All right, let's talk about some receivers. So first off, let's talk about receiver starts this week. Listen, typically me and Buck would do sits first, but for some reason my spreadsheet sees starts first. I'm going solo. I'm going rogue. I'm making sure that I do everything here positive first. So let's talk about some wide receiver starts. First one's Hunter Renfrow. A lot of people have, I think we've talked about Hunter Renfrow to death, but the thing with Hunter Renfrow is, number one, earlier this year, he had a nice solid game against Kansas City. He found the end zone. Number two is that Kansas City is a slot funnel defense. They are one of the top teams in fantasy points allowed to the slot this year. Hunter Renfrow plays about 50-50 of his snaps in the slot. The other aspect of this whole thing, too, is that Renfrow is now the number one wide receiver on this team. He runs the most routes. So there's no more wondering if he's just a slot receiver, if he's going to have limited routes. No, forget it. Hunter Renfrow is a locked and loaded, solid wide receiver, too, this week against Kansas City. If you're looking for a deeper name, Christian Kirk against the Rams. Now, the Rams have become a slot funnel defense over the last 5 weeks. They've allowed a bunch of points to the slot. And in my opinion, Christian Kirk, we haven't seen the big games in a long time because they had the bye. Then the Kyler Murray's coming back. And now they're playing the Rams. The Rams could easily shadow Hopkins with Jalen Ramsey. I don't think that will happen. They have not done that all year. But the Rams have really solidified themselves on the outside, and where they're getting beat is in the middle of the field. That's where Christian Kirk does most of his damage. So if you're looking for a deeper name, wide receiver 3, I think Christian Kirk's not a bad play. Next name is Jarvis Landry. Now, Marlon Humphrey's out for the year. Landry quietly had a 100-yard receiving day against Baltimore just a few weeks ago. Now, Landry has been a huge disappointment most of the season, but when you look at the numbers for Baltimore, they've allowed 19.9 points per game to outside wide receivers over the last 5 weeks. That is tied for the most over that span. So Baltimore, you don't think of as a vulnerable defense against wide receivers, but they have been on the perimeter. Landry plays about 50-50 inside and out, and he is the number one. So he quietly had that big game last week. I think Landry, you can go right back to him again if you need to. And then the next name I want to bring up, Terry McLaurin against Dallas. I just kind of want to give a little boost to Terry because he's had a couple slow weeks in a row, but we've kind of talked about this because of his matchups. He had a couple tough games against tough teams over the last few weeks. That changes against Dallas. Dallas has been very vulnerable against outside receivers, averaging 18.2 points per game to perimeter wide receivers. That's up there for wide receivers over the last 5 weeks. I think Terry McLaurin finally has a bounce back week. So if you have McLaurin, start him with confidence. The final one's Brandon Ayuk against Cincinnati. Now, and I keep throwing out numbers. So league average over the last 5 weeks in half-point PPR points allowed for out wide receivers is 13.6. So 18, 19 is big time. So that's why I'm bringing this up. The other one is Brandon Ayuk, who's playing against the Cincinnati Bengals. And the Bengals have been, I know Chidobe Awuzie banged up, hurt. We'll see if he's going to be available for this game. But they've allowed 16.7 points to outside receivers. I'm not 100% convinced that Debo is going to be back for this one. So I expect maybe a nice Brandon Ayuk game. Now, kicking over to wide receiver sits. Mike Evans against Buffalo. Now that Tre'Davious White is out, we haven't seen the Bills defense yet against a team that throws against them. Obviously these numbers are very skewed because of the Bills game and the Bills Patriots game. But the Bills have been very good against perimeter receivers. Tre'Davious White would not have an impact on Mike Evans. Tre'Davious White has struggled against bigger receivers in his career. Kenny Galladay's, Devontae Parker's. So I think Mike Evans, it's more of a scheme thing. And I would be concerned about Mike Evans this week against Buffalo. Brandon Cooks, with David Mills playing at quarterback, Seattle's been very good against perimeter receivers. They shut down Terry McLaurin. They shut down Brandon Ayuk last week. And quietly, the Seattle Seahawks secondary on the outside is very good. So I think that worries me about Brandon Cooks. Odell Beckham Jr., after a couple games where he scored a touchdown, I am a little concerned against Arizona. Arizona's been very tough against perimeter wide receivers, only allowing 10.7 points per game on the outside. Julio Jones. I know a bunch of us are excited that Julio is back. If he plays against Jacksonville is a slot funnel defense. So Jacksonville allows, only 49% of their fantasy points to perimeter wide receivers. That's about 6% lower than league average. So I don't like Julio's matchup even if he plays. And the final one's Michael Gallup. If you're looking for a deeper name, I know he's had some big games, caught the touchdown, but Washington football team has been tough against downfield threats. So I think that I am a little concerned. Over the last 5 weeks, they've really shored up that secondary. They're playing a lot more zone. Early on in the season, they were playing more man. So I'm a little worried about Michael Gallup. All right, tight end starts. My first one is going to be Gerald Everett. Houston has been absolutely atrocious against tight ends. So they're sixth in my metric for adjusted fantasy points allowed to tight ends. They average 12.5 points per game. League average is 9.9. So Gerald Everett is one of those tight ends, and I bring this up all the time, is we want tight ends that actually play. And I thought I had it open, but let me pull it up real quick. I talk about routes run to dropbacks is really, really important for tight ends. And league average last week, 53%. The week before was about 48%, but right around 50% is league average tight ends route run to dropbacks. Gerald Everett runs a route about 67% of the time. That's inside the top 20 amongst tight ends. And, he had a very bad game, but you got to keep in mind, too, the opportunities he had last week, he fumbling in the red zone, bad drops. I understand all that. But if one of those turns the other way and he scores, we're really all in on Gerald Everett. So I think Everett's a solid streamer tight end this week if you need him. The next name on my list is Dawson Knox. He's less of a streamer and more of like if you have two tight ends. Knox is coming off a bad game against the Patriots. There's nothing you can really do about that. But this guy led the NFL in routes run to dropbacks amongst tight ends last week. 92%. And, you don't see that. That's like unheard of. That's bigger than Travis Kelce. That's higher than Gronk. That's higher than Kittle. That's higher than most tight ends. He was number one on the week. I think this is a monster week for Dawson Knox. I think he's a DFS start. He's my start of the week at the tight end position. I want all the Dawson Knox I can get. If you're looking for another name, I'm not as high on this one, but it's Austin Hooper. Baltimore, if Harrison Bryant is out with the ankle injury, and if Njoku does not play, Hooper's going to be the only man in town, right? So you would think that the targets will funnel to him a little more. So if you're desperate, I like Austin Hooper. On the tight end sit side, it's only one player, and it's TJ Hawkinson. And Hawkinson actually scored a touchdown last week against Minnesota. That's great, but there was no Eric Kendricks in that game. That's their key tight end, key coverage linebacker, which really helped Hawkinson. But Denver is just on a different level against tight ends. So if you look at fantasy points allowed in my adjusted metric, they are 31st in that metric. And this is the toughest matchup in the week for any tight end with the Patriots out on bye. So I think that if you have Hawkinson, I'd rather play Knox. I'd rather play Gerald Everett, believe it or not, over TJ Hawkinson. There you go. Terrible take, number 2 on the day. Jumping down to some defensive streamers. And in my metric, the 49ers are number 1. And basically what I look at is I take the defense, how many points they've scored versus adjust that for who they played. And then I do the same thing on the offense and adjust it. And then I do the matchup. The 49ers against Cincinnati are by far the best matchup on the week. Don't know why. That's the way it came out. We just saw what the Bengals, happened to them last week against the Chargers. When they can't run the football, Burrow has been a little exposed to turnovers. And, and the 49ers have players, man. They do have players in that defense, and I think, they are getting healthier, so I think that's something I would monitor. The next team is the Browns versus the Baltimore Ravens. I think you're playing with fire. Something in my gut tells me this one's going to be off. But 2 weeks ago when they faced, the Browns did have a double-digit fantasy point day against this Ravens defense. Lamar has had his ups and downs against the Browns, and the Browns can get after the pass. They can rush the passer. And it's evident that when Lamar's under pressure, he'll create turnovers. They had 4 interceptions in that game, so something worked there. The next one's Packers versus the Bears. I think a lot of people know this already, but Justin Fields coming back could be a good thing for the Packers. The Packers are also getting Jair Alexander back. They're also getting Smith back, their edge rusher. So the Packers are one that I've picked up in a couple leagues. The Titans against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, this is a loaded one. I think this matters if they get some of their linebackers back. I think we'll have to look at the Saturday show. We'll talk a little bit about the Titans' health in the defensive side because Jacksonville could be a solid one. And finally, it's the Chargers versus the Giants. Now, this isn't a metrics thing. This is just common sense. Jake Fromm has not been with this team long, so I don't know how well he's going to know the playbook. The Giants, so many. And the worst part about Jake Fromm is that the Giants they don't have their guys yet. Tony's out. Galladay's missed practice. Shepard's limited. So it's not even he's out there with the starters playing with them, getting reps. He's playing with a bunch of guys who might not play in the game. So, and the Chargers defense, I brought this up yesterday, 2 days ago with Jordan. It's just getting healthy. So I think the Chargers are another solid defense. All right, kickers. I know this is where people go here for kickers, and I'm all for it. I come for that. My number 1 kicker on the week is Greg Joseph, playing tonight against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Number 2 is Chris Boswell, playing against Minnesota in this game. So if you get one of these kickers, I think it's going to be fun. I think both these guys are going to be in that 9 to 11 range for points. Greg Zuerlein, Dallas kicker against Washington football team, another one of my tier 1 kickers. I try to eliminate the guys that are well-owned. I'm not going to tell you to play Boss and Nat Gay and pick up Justin Tucker, guys. Yeah. Oh, why don't you also pick up Jonathan Taylor off waivers, guys? In the kicker world, it's insulting when you say just play Justin Tucker. Anyway, tier 2, Brandon McManus, Denver kicker against Detroit. Detroit's been very bad against kickers this year. If you're looking for a crazy deep name, Brett Maher, the Saints kicker. Brett Maher is. I might have missed that. I think he's the Saints kicker. Going against the Jets. Sorry. Brett Maher. I messed this one up. I think I did. Sorry, folks. Give me 1 second. Brett Maher is playing against. Yeah, sorry. Brett Maher is the New Orleans kicker. He's playing against the Jets. Sorry, I knew I messed it up. He's a deep name. Only 5 to 6 points his first couple weeks, but Jets have been exposed against kickers this season. Randy Bullock, if you couldn't get Greg Joseph or Chris Boswell, and you need a deeper name too. Randy Bullock, the Titans. If Julio's back, this offense starts moving the ball a little bit more. They play Jacksonville this week. Randy Bullock is not a bad kicker option as well. All right, folks, those are all our starts, sits, and streamers this week for Week 14 action. Before I go into Buck and Ryan's playoff waiver wire picks, we're going to take another quick commercial break for one of our sponsors, Jersey Jungle. We'll be back right after this.
Are you a merchandise maniac or Jersey junkie like myself? You need to check out the Jersey Jungle. They handle their business on Instagram at the Jersey Jungle. You can use their promo code TCK for 10% off of 1 or 2 jerseys, 15% off of 3 or more jerseys. Now, if you've been watching the show for this season or a couple seasons, you know that my backdrop, if you're streaming live with us on video, you know my backdrop is always a couple of jerseys. Those jerseys are coming from the Jersey Jungle. They're high quality stitch and twill jerseys. I collect NFL jerseys, but I'm also a baseball guy. So I have baseball jerseys as well. I collect Hall of Fame jerseys. I have a Jackie Robinson. I have a Ken Griffey Jr. I have a Willie Mays jersey. I got a Shohei Ohtani jersey as well because the guy has been absolutely on fire. Go get yourself a jersey, basketball, baseball, hockey, football, college. They got rookies as well. Home, away. They have customs. They have camouflage, whatever you're feeling. Retro jerseys from any sport. Go hit up the Jersey Jungle on Instagram. DM the Jersey Jungle. Use the promo code TCK for 10% off of 1 or 2 jerseys, 15% off of 3 jerseys. These are already half price that you're going to find on the website. They're high quality, stitch and twill, game authentic jerseys. Go check them out. The Jersey Jungle on Instagram.
All right, let's talk playoff waiver wire players under 50% owned that we think that you should take a look at. If you want to listen to my picks, Sky, Dweez, and Jordan, previous week's episodes are up. We have already discussed this, but I got Buck and Ryan to hit me up via the text, and I've kind of figured out the guys they picked, and I kind of put some notes together. But for Ryan, he had 4 because he's a cheater. He just had to have the actual classic, corporate. He's basically Ryan's corporate on this team, so he's like, he gets to do what he wants. Anyway, Kadarius Toney. I picked Shepard. He picked Toney. And Toney, listen, Toney's been super exciting this year. I'm just gonna shut the old door. Sorry, folks. Anyway, yeah, Kadarius Toney's been really exciting all year this year against and I know he's explosive. He's not been able to stay healthy, but he does have intriguing matchups: Cowboys, Eagles, Bears. And I think the problem with Toney is that, number one, he's hurt, so is Shepard. But when Shepard, Galladay, and Darius Slayton is on the field, does he more fit like a Rondell Moore mode where he's a really good player, but he's behind the veterans? And I think that's what worries me about Toney, but I understand the upside play of having him, especially because Galladay hasn't stayed healthy, Darius Slayton has missed time, and Shepard, forget about it. I love him to death, but the dude can't stay on the field. Next one is J.D. McKissick. McKissick, they had to buy, then he got hurt, and now it's been like all Antonio Gibson, so people are going to forget about J.D. They do face the Eagles, Cowboys, and Eagles in the next 3 weeks. The Eagles are 20th against pass-catching running backs. The Cowboys are 30th. So they're tough. These aren't good things in points allowed in my metric, and then 20th against the Eagles. But with Logan Thomas now done, I like Ricky Seals-Jones as a potential streamer, tight end down the stretch. He does have very nice matchups. But Ricky Seals-Jones doing his own thing too. So I think it's a good point here. Don't forget about JD. If he was dropped, he's been very solid, especially in PPR formats. He brings up one of the guys he brings up is Dantaforman. Now, I like Foreman this week, but he has the Steelers, the 49ers, and the Dolphins, 24th, 30th, and 22nd in my ground game metrics. Not great. All bottom 10 to 12 matchups. All bottom 10, actually, matchups for running backs. I am interested to see what they do with McNichols, but I think Foreman, man, people don't realize this dude ran for 2,000 yards his final season at Texas. So it's insane. He was a monster. Injuries killed him, but I think Foreman he's quietly – 20 carries for 100 yards against the Patriots is nothing to snuff at. So I do like this pick too. His final one was Kolkamet. And Kolkamet, quietly 73% routes run to dropbacks, which is pretty solid. We just brought up the fact that most tight ends the average tight end's around 50%. So he's well above that. So he's on the field. He's running routes. He does play the Vikings in the first week of the fantasy playoffs. That's tough. But then he gets Seattle, which is first in my adjusted points per game allowed metric. And then they play the Giants, who are 21st. But the Giants' defense has been really good against receivers, and I think that maybe if they play some tougher tight ends, they might be okay there. So Cole Kmet, a deeper name to monitor, especially if you need a tight end, especially his usage has gone up. Buck had picked some interesting ones. First, he picked up Matt Breida. I think I was all in on Breida. I was. But he fumbles the ball. They activate Zach Moss. I think they want Zach Moss to be a thing. I think this coaching staff wants Zach Moss to be the lead guy. They benched him for a couple weeks. It could have been the weather, but I think after that performance, why would they then go back to Breida? So I understand, Reese, you got the Panthers, the Patriots, the Falcons, the Bills do over the next the playoff week. So if Buck's feeling it, stash him, keep him stashed. I don't mind it, but I think the Zach Moss situation, if Zach Moss is active again, which I don't see why he wouldn't be, I don't think Breida's going to be really impacted there. Kendrick Bourne, Buck brought up to me that, Bourne is, he's doing his thing the last couple weeks. He's got the Colts, Bills, and Jags. Colts allow the league high 76% of their fantasy points to outside wide receivers. That favors Bourne over a guy like Myers. The Bills lost Tre'Davious White. Of course, we didn't see it last, 3 passing attempts against the Bills in that bad weather game, but, that should normalize a little bit. Let's see what the no Tre'Davious White Bills look like, but that's a benefit for Kendrick Bourne. And then the Jaguars are a slot funnel defense, but they're the Jaguars. So you would expect Kendrick Bourne, they've used creative ways to get him the football. So Bucks feeling Kendrick Bourne as a deeper name to stash could be an asset during the fantasy playoffs. The final one, which I think is the best one, is JaMycal Hasty. Elijah Mitchell now is dealing with some knee issues. Jeff Wilson's surgically repaired knee flared up now, and then Elijah Mitchell also has the concussion. And the 49ers off running game, I've been saying this for a long time. It's not that they run a committee, it's that no one can stay healthy. I think Elijah Mitchell over the last month has proven that point. When they have a guy, they ride that guy, but no one can stay healthy. And Mitchell is now banged up. He's got the concussion. That's a problem. The Hasty thing, listen, especially this week, if Hasty gets the start, forget about it. The Falcons in the fantasy playoffs, though, the Falcons are 9th against running backs in my metric. The Titans are 18th. The Texans are 23rd. But they are a plus matchup on the ground. So, Hasty is someone, I just think you just stash him. You stash Hasty. It does not hurt. Wilson's knee could be a problem. And what if Mitchell, the concussion lingers or his knee issue flares up? Hasty could be the last man standing, and that 49ers run offense, forget about it. All right, folks. Those are all our playoff waiver wire ads for this week that we think you should take a look at in your leagues. We're going to take a couple quick questions, and then we're going to get out of here, folks. Corbin Boyd. I have Darren Waller and Freiermuth who plays tonight. Should I risk it and bank on Waller playing? I would pick up Foster Morneau and stash him then. I would rather prefer Darren Waller, even though he had a slow game against Kansas City a couple weeks ago. I'm not all over Pat Freiermuth. I think if he scores a touchdown, it's shame on me. But the Vikings have been very good against tight ends this year when Eric Kendricks has been in the lineup. So I think if you have a Foster Morneau, if you could pick him up and stash him, then I'm okay with waiting on Darren Waller. Will Hayes, what's up? Has a hard decision. I have to play. I have Madison. Is Cooks playing tonight? How do you feel about playing Osborne? I addressed all this, man. I did. If you want to take a listen, I actually addressed all this in the beginning of the show. You're playing Cook. If Cook is in, you cannot start Madison with confidence. The Pittsburgh Steelers are not a run defense where you could just say, hey, play everybody against Pittsburgh. They have struggled. They did spring a leak a couple weeks ago, but I think against Mixon, I'm not going to start Madison if Cook's active. If he goes off, it is what it is, guys. I mean, how can you start a backup running back? Cooks, when he gets in there, he's a workhorse. And Osborne is a fine wide receiver 3 play. I would need to know who your options are. Henry is back soon, just found out. C-Dog, if you're talking about Derrick Henry, I don't know. I don't think Derrick Henry's coming back soon. I don't think he's going to be back for the fantasy playoffs, personally. But unless you saw something over the last hour, I don't think he's going to be back until, at best, I would say the fantasy championship week. Mano, call me crazy, but if Cook is healthy, could they both be a start if you're struggling in RB area? Rex Peterson. So would you rather start Madison and Cook than Rex Burkhead and Adrian Peterson? Probably. Yeah. The Seattle Seahawks do have the Houston Texans this week. So I do think that Adrian Peterson might actually be okay. But I get what you're saying. So if you have to start Madison in that scenario, I don't know. Doesn't seem too great, but I get what you're saying. Official Savage, what's up, buddy? Tip the cap to you as always. How you doing, brother? And then Jonathan, thoughts on Guyton and with Allen possibly out and Mike Williams. Yes, if Mike Williams and Allen are out, just keep in mind Bradbury and Adoree Jackson. The Giants are a very good defense. Giants secondary is solid. Let me just pull it up for you too, because the Giants are, now I'm going to have to look into it. So the Giants actually have sprung a little bit of a leak over the last 5 against perimeter wide receivers, 15.7 points per game to outside wide receivers. So what does that mean? That means that Guyton would probably be okay. But let's see the type of receivers. We're going to just talk through this on air. I don't really care. I can do whatever I want. The Giants, let's see. First wide receivers. So Hunter Renfrow, 7 for 49 and 1. Mike Evans, 6 for 73 and 1. Godwin, 6 for 65. So I think that Mike Evans thing would probably be the key there. Devonta Smith, though, 2 for 22. Jalen Waddle, 9 for 90, but he's primary slot. And then Devontae Parker, 5 for 62. I think the real big thing is like where are the deep threats hitting them, right? So, Robert Woods had a big game against them. Tyreek Hill had a nice day, 12 for 94 and 1. Lamb got loose, 484 and 1. Yeah. If Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are out, I think Jalen Guyton could be a wide receiver 3 because of the numbers they're saying. But we would have to hear who you're actually playing in that one. All right, start 2. Mark, Mooney, Ayuk, Osborne. So Ayuk is definitely in. That's not a question. Then it becomes Mooney. Chicago has Green Bay. And then Osborne has Pittsburgh. I'm going to go Mooney and Ayuk in that one. All right, folks, that's all we have for today. That's it. That's the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast on the Fantasy Focused YouTube channel. Starts, sits, Thursday Night Football preview, some playoff waiver wire names to pick up. We've done it all. If you needed a kicker, make sure you're playing a Thursday Night Football kicker. You won't regret it. Once again, I'm your host, Bobby Lamarco. This is it. All our episodes are on the Believe Podcast Network and brought to you by BetOnline AG. Shout out to our partners over at the Fantasy Football Network for streaming all our shows. Shout out to our partners at the Fantasy Focus YouTube channel. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Sky will be on later today with someone from the commish crew will be on, probably Christopher Benavides. But one of the commish guys and Sky will be on later today. And then I'll be doing player trends before the Sunday Live Start Sit show. Make sure you're jumping on and joining us on Sunday Live and becoming a super chatter. You get a shot at winning a jersey, folks. So if you get on, join us. Make sure you're joining us and get all your questions answered. Once again, I'm Bobby Lamarco. Thanks for joining, guys. Enjoy your weekend. I am out of here.